Welcome to video 2, and in this video I'm going to take you through the correct way to paint your Gel-iT gel polishes. So in video 1 we covered the preparation of the nail, where we used our dehydrate and our protein bond, and now we're going to carry on with the next section, which is to paint. And in this video we're going to be using the Maskscara rubber base coat. Now, rubber base coat is a thicker base coat than the usual Pro Base. Pro Base is thinner, and a lot of people want to know what the difference is between the two. Well, rubber base coats, they give you more adhesion on the nail, so they don't necessarily add to giving you a stronger nail. If you do want strength in the nail, you would need to build the rubber base to create the structure. So before we even get further into business, let me just explain something. If your natural nail is really thin and weak, you have to build structure onto the natural nail surface. You cannot expect any product to last as it should if you have a weak foundation to begin with. So I normally in my class would say, think of a house. If the foundation is not built properly, the walls are going to start cracking. So if you've got a weak base and you're just applying a thin coat of base coat, color and top coat, and your customer comes back with chipping 2 or 3 days later, it's not product failure. It is all about the base that is too weak to hold the structure. So you would need to reinforce this nail. And as you can see, my nail has taken a little bit of a beating because I love changing colors way too frequently. So I'm going to show you how I apply my rubber base to create a little bit of structure. If it's not needed, you can go with 1 coat of rubber base and you should be good to go. So rubber base is thicker than your conventional top coat. It does give you more adhesion, so you tend to get a longer lasting gel polish wear out of a rubber base coat. But if you are somebody who loves changing color frequently, I would suggest using the Maskscara Pro Base, because the soak off is nice and easy with that one. This one lasts longer, so you're going to get longer wear. It's going to take a little bit longer to remove, but it is an amazing base coat to use. We're going to be using as a finish the non-wipe carbon, which is the newer top coat that Maskscara has introduced. It is thinner than what the usual non-wipe top coat is, but the nice thing about carbon is it gives you a harder finish, so you get less scratching. It's very stain resistant, so it is a high shine. It's a beautiful top coat to work with, so I enjoy working with this one. And then for the demo, I'm going to be using blackjack, because I know I'm going to get questions about my black is not curing, and I have to tell you that it has everything to do with using the correct lamp. Number 1, if you're using a lamp that's too weak, you're not going to get curing of black. Black is your hardest pigment to cure, so you need to make sure that you're using the correct lamp and that you're curing for the correct time and that your application is perfect. So often people would say to me that the other pigments are curing fine, it's just blackjack. Pigments vary, they differ. Black is the hardest pigment to cure. First things first, when you're working with any polish, be it base coat, top coat or color, always make sure that you give the polishes a good roll so that you get that photo initiator mixed up in the product, so that you don't have any issues with gels that are going to lift and peel and do all sorts of funny things 2 or 3 days later. Right, so let's begin. So in our first video we did the whole preparation, so we're not going to go through this whole process of prep again, but we're going to start with base coat application. So I've got my dehydrate on and I've got my protein bond on this nail. So I'm going to start with my rubber base coat. So what I do is I would usually clean the one side of my brush so that I have sort of gel on the one side of the brush and not too much product sitting on the other side. Just remember, this one is thicker. And I'm going to start by, there's many techniques. Some start at the edge, paint down, some start in the back, some start in the center. I guess it's all various techniques, but I'm going to start with the most simple basic technique of all. We're going to apply slightly away from the cuticle, and you're going to push your brush up towards the cuticle, getting it as close as you can without touching the skin. Right. Then using my brush, I'm going to swing it around to the one side, and I'm going to swing it around on the other side as well to get the neatest possible finish on that cuticle area. And I can go back in and I can work my brush around that cuticle area to kind of get it as close as I can without touching the actual skin sitting around the nail. If I do go over the cuticle, I'm going to get lifting. So I'm going to wipe the excess gel off my brush, and using the product that is there, I'm going to use my brush and gently work the product down the nail. Always just cleaning off the excess as I go along. You want to keep your first layer nice and thin. Let's call this your first slip layer. So this would be your first layer of base coat. Remember to seal your free edge. And this is kind of like the norm. So you would cure this, off you would go, and you would start with your color. But in this case, I'm going to reinforce my nail, because remember I said my nail's quite thin. So we don't want to get chipping 2 or 3 days later. I want to have a nice strong foundation so that my gel bonds beautifully to that surface. So using, and I'm not curing this layer, I'm going to use a second layer of my rubber base. And this time I'm going to let it form like a little bit of a drop on the end of my brush. And I'm going to apply that to my cuticle area once again. This time I'm going to work my product from one side and gently just work it to the other side. So almost as if my brush is floating on top of the gel. Then using that layer of product, I'm going to swing my gel brush from one side over to the other side in order to get a thicker, more structured layer going down my nail. Okay, so you can take your brush and you can drag. So remember not to paint, you're floating this layer over right down to the free edge, and this will level out on its own. You can also use a cuticle stick and make sure you clean the side walls if you've got too much product on the side. And what you can do is I'm going to turn my finger over just for a few seconds, and this is going to draw to the center of the nail so that I don't end up with a flat nail, if you know what I mean. Like you get that really flat toenail look. But I'm just going to let it draw to the center for a few seconds. Then using the low heat mode on my Sun 5, I'm going to cure this nail. So let me explain low heat to you, because everybody's going to ask me, are you getting a heat spike? Low heat is there for the prevention of heat spikes, and it's a very overlooked setting on the Sun 5 lamp. I don't think a lot of techs are sure what the low heat setting is for. So when you use low heat, it takes you through various light phases. So it introduces the light slowly to the nail. So when you get a heat spike, essentially what's happening is you're getting a burst of light, and you've got too much product on the nail, or too much top coat or base coat or anything that could cause a spike. And when you have too much light, it causes this heat reaction, and you feel it quite intensely. And that kind of in a nutshell is what a heat spike is all about. It's kind of like, if I could make an example, it's kind of like the red hanger sale. If the doors are open, there is this rush of people coming in. So that's what happens if you use your light on its normal setting and you put in a thick layer of base coat, and you're wondering why you're getting this sharp burning sensation. It's way too much light coming in at a fast pace. It's just light introduced way too fast, and the initiator in the product gives off a massive heat reaction, and you feel it as a heat spike. But when you're using your low heat setting, what's happening is that you're actually introducing light slowly. So it's kind of like letting 5 customers in at a time. So the initiator doesn't get overexcited, and you don't get that heat reaction building up on the nail. So it is way safer to use a low heat setting when you're working with a thick application of builder gel or a thick application of your rubber base coat. So it's a longer curing process because you're going through all the light settings, but it is the best way to save the nail, because nobody wants heat spikes. They're not good for your nails. So try to avoid getting excessive heat spikes, because if you are excessively causing heat spikes on your customers' nails, you could find that their nail plate starts to separate from the nail bed. So be very cautious with heat spikes. So here we go. I've given my blackjack a good shake. And now we're going to start with our first layer. So when painting with your Gel-iT colors, you want to make sure that your first layer is your thinnest layer. So I'm cleaning my brush off once again, no polish on the one side, and I've got my gel on the other side. Sorry if I'm a little bit out of focus. And I'm going to start once again in the center of my nail, making my first mark to get it as close as I can. And I'm going to work my gel over to the one side and work it over to the other side. So remember, we're not working with nail polish here. So the whole 3 strokes rule, personally for me, is like out the window. It doesn't matter when you're working with gels. Gels are not drying as you're working with them. They only dry once exposed to a UV light. So I've got my gel where I need it to be. Then using my brush, I'm going to brush down, cleaning off the excess paint to get my color neatly applied to my nail. Try not to flatten your brush too much. So sort of like if I'm turning my finger on the side, you can see I'm angling my brush to sort of like hold it upright. And I'm applying my first coat of black to the nail. And I want you to see something, especially with black. My first coat is actually, let's just seal our free edge off, is actually translucent. You can see I've got uneven spots. This is the first coat. If you're going to try and even out your first coat of black, you're going to have uncured gel and it's not going to last long. It's going to start peeling and doing all sorts of funny things. So don't worry if the finish is uneven. Your second and your third coat will even out your application. So your first coat needs to be super thin. And with the black jack, we can cure for 60 seconds in our Sun 5 and you can use it as at full power. So here we go, 60 seconds. Right, so we're going to do our second layer. We've cured the first for 60, so let's do layer number 2. Again, cleaning my brush off so that I don't have way too much product, so it's not excessive. Starting at the center, working my gel from one side over to the other side. Right, I can clean that excess brush off, and using the gel that's on the nail, I'm going to paint that layer down over the rest of the nail surface, keeping my layers nice and thin. Remember, thin is your friend, so it's no use rushing, because if you're going to rush, you're going to get your layers all wrong and you're going to get peeling and all sorts of funny bubbling 2 or 3 days later, and we don't want that to happen. So just making sure my layers are nice and neat and thin. And you'll notice when you do your second layer, it's actually easier, because it's almost as if the second layer grips to the first layer, so it becomes easier. So that's my second layer of black, and already you can see it's pretty solid. Right, same process. We're going to cure for 60 seconds. Right, now my third coat. This is my final coat. You know, I know some people will actually do 4 layers, and that's fine if you're doing 4 layers. So 3 layers for me is that third layer is kind of like the finishing layer. It just gives you that final coverage that you need. So again, I'm starting close to my cuticle at that center point, working my product to the one side and over to the other side. Right, so I'm going to work that product down, and remember, don't go thick. So sometimes as the layers go, we tend to want to add more product and just rush the process. Keep your layers thin, and you can use that last coat as kind of like the coat to cover up. So if you are seeing any imperfections or anything that you need to fix up, now is the time. So working my black over. So black is not that hard, guys. It's actually very easy to work with. And yep, it's stunning. Once it's on and you see it in its immaculate beauty, it is always a ever classic. So that's my black painted neatly from side to side, as close to my cuticle as I can possibly get without touching the skin, because the worst thing you want to have is that gap, so it looks like a regrowth. We want to avoid that. Takes a bit of practice, but practice makes perfect. So one other tip I just want to give you is that when you place your hand in the light, don't let your customer place her hand like this, because my light's going to struggle to reach that corner, and that's going to cause undercuring. So sometimes when you wipe it, you'll find that the black shrivels up and shrinks around that edge. It's because of the way the customer held her hand in the lamp. So they should always keep their hands fingers apart, and I try to always tell my customers to keep the thumb upright so that it's facing the lamp. Right, so we're going to cure our last layer for 60 seconds, and then we move on to top coat. Right, so here we go, top coat. So when I use my top coat, I like to break the rules just a little bit. So I'm using a little bit more than I should, so I go slightly thicker. I don't know if you can see that little drop forming at the edge of my brush, and I'm going to apply that drop to my nail, same way I did the color. Just be careful that you don't use too much top coat, because it could flood into the sides. And I'm going to use my brush and I'm going to drag my top coat down over the nail surface. So just be careful that you don't use too much top coat so that you don't get any flooding, but you do want to go slightly thicker. It's a little hairy. Okay, so we've got our top coat over. If you do find that your top coat is creating sort of like a water and oil effect where you have these holes appearing, you could be applying your top coat way too thin. And also remember that your top coat even needs a shake, so you need to mix it, turn it, stir, shake it, because even the photo initiating here can settle. So you need to make sure that you do that to your top coats, and it's something that a lot of techs overlook. They don't mix their top coats, so make sure you mix it. So I've got my top coat on, it's nice and settled, and I'm going to cure my top coat for 60 seconds as well. And there we go. That's my finished result. All nicely built up, nice and structured. The nails not weak and thin. I've got my color perfectly painted. I've got no patches showing. I am assured that my gel is 100% cured, and it's as easy as that. I think the simple mistakes that happen in the beginning is because sometimes we want to rush and we want to work a little bit faster, or sometimes we are applying product too thick, and one of the big things is using the incorrect lamp. That is a big problem. Incorrect lamps can lead to undercured product, which leads to overexposure and leads to allergic reactions. So there's a reason why we say follow the manufacturer's instructions. It's really for your safety as a nail tech and for your customer safety using the product at the end of the day. But applying gel polish is really easy. It just takes practice, and practice practice, practice. That is the secret to achieving marvelous results with the Maskscara Gel-iT system. If you love it as much as I do, you will never use any other product. I promise you. Love it. So I hope you enjoyed these videos. So remember, video 1 is about preparation, video 2 is about painting, and if you have any queries, you're welcome to contact us directly through our social media pages, and you can ask us questions. We'll try to get back to you as soon as possible. So look forward to more videos, guys. Hope you enjoyed this, and thanks for watching.